Time ever going live on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. It's pretty crazy trying to figure out how to get it all work. And so, if you can tell me where you're tuning in from, like where you live, and if you're on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, I would love to see you in the chat so I can see who's all here. And I also would like to know what brought you here if you're already watching. Tell me what brought you here. If you're on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, I'd love that, and where you're from. So that would be really, really awesome. Hi, Mary. Hi, thanks for watching. Oh, can you believe I'm here in Illinois? I can't believe it. It's really crazy being in this room. I don't know if anybody else can understand it like I can, but maybe you can relate to like going back to your childhood bedroom and how you felt then and all of that. So that's the room that I'm in right now, the room that I grew up in. I came to Illinois to celebrate my sister's birthday, and I was like, well, I can probably do my live video down there, but it didn't really like hit me till today that like I'm probably going to be recording in this room. And I don't know. I think it's actually really neat because I always have to kind of go back to the emotions of that time when I tried to take my life, and to be in this room. I don't know. It's really, really neat. So yeah. So if you know anybody who's hurting, please do. We're gonna like, kind of just wait a couple minutes for some more people to hop on. And if you know anybody else who might benefit from my story, whether or not you've heard it before, anyone who needs like a little bit more hope and encouragement and strength, this would be the best thing, at least tonight, that you can probably do for them by sharing this link to my video, and just being there for them yourself, of course. So hopefully you can hear me okay. It seems like oh, hey, yes, you guys must be able to hear me. Um, New York, Karen, thank you for joining. And I'm from UAE. What country is that? Samantha, please tell me. I see your little flag there. I would love to know what country that is. And if you guys can tell me what platform you're tuning in from, that would be awesome, because this is the first time I have ever tried to do this on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So it's exciting because there's some really fun things coming up ahead, and other people I want to share with you and their stories. So I'm going to be using this software in the future. Hello. Hi, Ray. I remember you. We sent you some book you won one time, right? I think. Thanks for coming back. Ohio. Um, Brian, North Dakota. Thank you. Thank you. And you're on Facebook, right? Awesome. Judy, Illinois. That is so, so cool. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. I'm going to be sharing my story. I'm going to be asking you if you have any questions that I can answer at the end. I will answer as many as I can. Yeah, Ray, I remember that. Thank you. I'm glad you got it. Plainfield, New York, Nebraska, Katie, Donna. That is awesome. So, so cool. Ryan, thank you so much for being here and helping with the chat. Thank you. I will be sharing my story really soon here. And then at the end, I'm going to be taking some questions, and I will be doing a giveaway too. I'll be giving away, I've got 2 of my books here. So I'm going to be giving both of these away, and taking prayer requests as well. So be thinking of your questions, any prayer requests you have, and we will be doing those at the end. But if you're just tuning in now, I wanted to, again, tell you that I'd love to know where you're coming from, where you're tuning in from, and if you're on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, because this is the first time I'm doing this on all 3 at once. So I'd love to know which platform you're on. And I'm so happy that I can see, it looks like I'm seeing the chat for Facebook. All of my chat looks like it's Facebook. So I wonder if that's going to, if the YouTube one will be integrated here. I guess we'll have to see, or Instagram. Yeah. So if you are on either of those, please let me know, just so I know that it's all working okay. That would be really, really awesome. Yeah, it looks like maybe that Instagram one isn't working. Let me see if there's anything I can do to still add that in if it didn't work correctly. You guys, I will be starting really soon. Thank you so much for being patient with me here. Let's see. I had it all set, but it might We might need to do this again for Instagram. I guess we'll see. So, thank you guys again for coming and listening to my story tonight. I hope that it's just a positive and encouraging experience for you. If you want to tell me why you decided to tune in tonight, that would be awesome to see. And what you like about virtual events. One of the reasons I wanted to do this was because, well, really, the biggest reason is because of everything that's going on in the world right now. And I just want to, I just really want people to know how much hope there is for them and how they can get through anything that they're going through and give them some strength and encouragement through sharing my story. So that was the biggest reason, but also to celebrate my survival. It's been 23 years since I survived my own suicide attempt at the age of 17. And I never, ever expected I would survive it. But God has taught me so much through that. And I just really wanted to kind of mark the occasion by doing a live sharing my story like this, or just a free event, which is kind of my favorite. And also, I wanted to know what you guys think about virtual events because I'm just reopening my speaking calendar after speaking for so many years. It kind of closed when everything happened with COVID. A bunch of my events were canceled and those started to get rescheduled, but my calendar really just opened for new requests. And I've never been able to answer all of my requests. So I just want to make sure that those people who maybe sent in requests before and didn't get to have me come yet know that I am available now. And the virtual option just started where I am going to be doing this for churches and schools and really anywhere that would like to have me share virtually, which will eliminate a lot of barriers when it comes to like travel restrictions or financial limitations. And I'm really, really excited about that. So tell me in the chat if you can what you like about virtual events and if you've heard my story before, how it has helped you. That's my next question. I would love to hear that. Or if you've read the book, that would be awesome. Judy from Illinois, thank you. Um, oh, Dubai, Samantha, it's Dubai. Thank you. I'm so grateful you were able to tell me that. Andrew, Facebook, Ray, you love virtual. Hope to see you in person sometime. Thank you. That would be awesome. I would love that too. There's so many of you I recognize on Facebook or Instagram, and I have never met you in person. Some of you I have, but it'd be so neat to meet some of you in person. So, Donna, your book was wonderful. Thank you so much. The comments I've been getting on my social media about the book and about my story and how it's been used in different people's lives, it just floors me. I'm still just speechless to this day how God has used my story. He definitely knew what he was doing when he saved my life and continued to bring me through the depths of my depression. And I am going to probably start on that note here. I always share my story from the beginning, so I'll probably be doing that um, the same right here today. But hopefully that'll help you give a little bit of context. And Samantha, Facebook, awesome. So I am in my childhood bedroom right now, which is so surreal to me. I came to Illinois to celebrate my sister's birthday, and I just really realized that I'd be doing my live video here today when it kind of came down to it. So I was so excited for that. Shailene, you're lost a niece and nephew to suicide. I'm so grateful to you and for your openness. Oh, you've passed it on the book on to others who are struggling. Wow, wow, wow. I'm so glad you've passed it on, but I'm so sorry for your niece and your nephew. That is just heartbreaking, I'm sure, for your whole family. I'm very, very sorry. And I'm glad to see that you're trying to help other people so that doesn't happen to anyone else. That's really the whole reason I share my story is so that nobody else makes the decision that I did. I don't want anybody ever to think that suicide is the answer or really even a feasible option like I did, because it will always take more from you than it could ever bring you. All right, I'm going to start now. It is about 11 minutes after 6, so some people might still hop on now, but we'll see. I want to thank you again for being here and just remind you if you have any questions or prayer requests. You can post those in the comments as well, and I will be answering questions at the end. And starting from the beginning, I want to say that I grew up very very normal. I had a really all American childhood. My parents were always married. I had an older brother, I had an older sister, and there weren't any major like trials or tragedies in my life as a kid. I didn't really have anything that I worried about. I had everything I needed, most of what I wanted. Um, and I thought growing up that life was always going to be that way, really simple and carefree and easy. And pretty quickly around 6th, 7th, 8th grade, when I was, around those ages is when I started to realize the world wasn't as great as I thought it was. People weren't as genuine as I thought they were, and I realized that there were wars going on in the world, there was sexual abuse going on in the world, that homelessness was going on in the world, and I became burdened by all of that. I wanted to do something to make a difference in the world. It was really troubling to me, that the more I learned how many things were happening around me. And so I volunteered at our local homeless shelter. It was just like 5 minutes down the road, 10 minutes maybe, every Friday night for about a year, roughly, when I was in seventh grade. And I did that because I wanted to make a difference. I just wanted to help kids have a home, have a bed to sleep in, make whatever difference I could, make sure families stayed together, all of that. And so I shared, you know, I shared with you that because that was when I first started wanting to help people. But I just didn't feel like I was making much of a difference. At the end of that year, I looked around and it looked to me like homelessness was just as much of an issue at the end of that year as it was when I had first started volunteering. And I felt like I really hadn't made a difference. I wanted to help people, but it what didn't seem like it was helping anyone much at all, very little, if anything. And so as I went into high school, I got a little more self-focused. I started to just focus on trying to make myself, my family, and my friends happy. And that happened for a good while. I like went well-ish for a while. Like the first couple years of high school, I think what pretty smoothly. I had a lot of friends. I was on the soccer team. My boyfriend was prom king. Um, Not a lot happened in the first couple years. It wasn't really troubling, but very quickly and very unexpectedly, a number of things started to go wrong. And among those things that went wrong, I had lost. I'd lost four friends and my grandmother. One of the friends I lost to suicide, actually, which was one of the hardest. I lost another friend to a brain tumor, one to a car accident, one to a motorcycle accident, and then I lost my grandmother, who I never got to know very well because she had had a stroke and she couldn't talk, and it was really hard for me to grieve her death. It came sort of as a shock. And my friend who I had lost to suicide was very very difficult for me because I just didn't know how to process that. I didn't know how to find peace after that happened. It was just very hard. And on top of those friends that passed away and my grandmother who passed away, within about a year and a half's time when all of that happened, I was also raped and being stalked by two young men. And I didn't know how to handle any of it. I was sort of like I was a huge people pleaser. I was also sort of the friend that everybody went to for help with their problems. I wasn't the only one, but I was one of the friends that people went to for help with all their problems, and I just didn't know who to talk to about how I was feeling. I didn't even know how to put words to how I was feeling, but I was spiraling down very, very quickly and very unexpectedly. I really started to just live for like, I wanna say live for the moment, but it was sort of different than that. I just did whatever it did to make myself happy. So I was smoking, I was drinking, I was going to parties, I was skipping classes, I was skipping school, just whatever made me happiest in the moment. And I spiraled further and further down into this deep and scary depression that I couldn't have even told you I was in. I really did not realize how bad I was doing. My parents didn't even know how bad I was doing, but they did know something was going on. They didn't know I'd been raped though. They didn't know um, how deep of a depression I was in, but they knew something was wrong, so they took me to, see a counselor, and I didn't really talk to them. So, they did tell me that I was struggling with anxiety, but that was all anybody really ever said. And I, continued on with my life pretty much as normal as I had before, as much as well as I could at least. Um, it was getting harder and harder though for me to just put one foot in front of the other. I had a really hard time getting up in the morning. I wanted to just sort of sleep my life away. And I had become really reckless, with my choices with driving and drinking and smoking and all of that. So there were a lot of signs, but I didn't know. I really just had no clue how bad I was doing until, shortly after all of this. So New Year's Eve of my senior year is when, I I decided I was gonna go out with my friends, and my parents had told me they wanted me to come home at, like, a reasonable time, really just shortly after my curfew. They were gonna let me go out a little bit longer that night because it was my senior year. It was New Year's Eve, so they just thought they'd let me go stay out a little bit later that night, but I didn't want to come home that night. I was hoping I could sleep over at a friend's house, and they didn't want me to, so we kind of went back and forth about what time I would come home, and eventually, I agreed to come home when they wanted me to, but I left the house sort of knowing I wouldn't be coming home at all that night, and I went to work, I worked for a couple hours, and then my friends picked me up, and after they picked me up, we went to this pizza restaurant that I had been working in. Or sorry, after I went to work at the pizza restaurant, my friends picked me up and we went to a party, excuse me. So we went to a party and I was actually the designated driver that night. I felt like I was making a lot of good choices. Um, wasn't drinking, I was taking care of my friends, I was making sure everybody was safe and happy, and around midnight, I called my mom to tell her I wasn't coming home, and that wasn't something I'd ever done before. My parents were always very loving and involved and protective and caring, and so when I called to say I wasn't coming home that night, I just hung up before my mom could even respond. I knew that she wouldn't be happy and she'd be worried about me, and I just didn't want her, I didn't wanna deal with it. I was starting to avoid everything. And so I stayed out that whole night, and it wasn't until the next morning when I came home for the first time, and as soon as I came home, it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, my, um my mom was in the living room, and she just said, "Oh, honey, you know, where were you? We were so worried about you. We didn't know if you were dead in a ditch somewhere or what had happened to you." And I felt, very guilty. I felt like, ugh, I never meant to worry them that much. I told them I wasn't coming home. I think I thought they would think I was fine because I called them and told them I wasn't coming home, but they worried, all night long. I don't think my mom slept at all, and I really hadn't slept. So after we talked, my parents told me that my punishment was going to be material and social. They told me that um all my things that I'd gotten for Christmas they were either going to return them or give them to somebody who would appreciate them, or they were going yeah, or give them to somebody who would appreciate them, and they were going to ground me until further notice. They really just wanted some more time to talk about what had happened and what they thought would be the right punishment, I think. And so I slept that whole day away. I was tired from being up the whole night before, and I slept the entire day all the way until the next morning, which just happened to be a Sunday morning. And in my family growing up, every single Sunday morning, we went to church. We would, go to church. I would go to Sunday school as a younger child, and as a teenager, just the normal church service. But I remember that I went into church and walked out of church feeling exactly the same way, very broken, very lost, very disillusioned, very confused, very empty, and um, losing I felt like I was just losing more hope by the minute, but I didn't have words for it like that at the time, and after we went home from church that day, I decided to put in some videos of my nephews who were very young at the time, just opening their Christmas presents. And I thought by watching the videos of them opening their Christmas presents, it would just put a smile on my face and cheer me up a little bit, and it did. They were super young and super cute, so it just brought some joy back to my life. But that was really short-lived, and right after I got done watching the videos, my best friend called me. My best friend's name was Kelly, and we had been friends since we were in 2nd grade, and she wanted me to come over to her house and make gingerbread houses before we were supposed to go back to school. This was our last day of Christmas break, actually, before we were supposed to go back to school, and I knew that I wasn't supposed to be going anywhere, but Kelly and I together really decided that I couldn't get in any worse trouble if I left, so I very dishonestly wrote a note to my parents saying that I was going for a walk and to get some time to think, and I I feel, still bad about that to this day, but I left with just a note behind me, and my friends picked me up at the end of the street, and I went to Kelly's house for a couple hours. We never made gingerbread houses, we just hung out and had fun, and then another friend dropped me off at the end of the street. I think that they said that they didn't want to, they didn't wanna drop me off in front of the house because they didn't want my parents to know that they had taken me or picked me up and get in trouble. So I just walked to the end of the street, and that was kind of the solution to that. So anyway, I I got dropped off at the end of the street after a couple of hours, and then I started to walk home, and I just felt empty. I felt like I had no fight left in me. Not that I would be fighting with my parents, I just knew it was back to real life sort of once I went home, and so I walked to the pizza restaurant that I've been working at. I got my paycheck and a pack of cigarettes, and I just tried to waste time as much as I could. I didn't know, how quickly I should be going home, but I knew my parents were probably starting to worry about me because normally I never went on a walk for that long. So after about a half an hour, I decided I should go home. I didn't want to worry them any more than I needed to. And so I very quickly got up and got out the door and started walking home, and it was almost like my feet wouldn't take me there. As I started to walk there, I just I knew this was like I was coming to the end of myself is really, really what it felt like. And so I walked over to the park that I grew up playing in. And this was kitty corner across the street from my parents' house in Lake Villa, Illinois, just about an hour north of Chicago. It's a really small town. I'm there right now in Lake Villa, but I walked over to the park just to clear my head. I wanted to try to get my mind and my heart wrapped around what had been going on in my life and how I was going to how I was going to move forward. And so I started swinging on the swings, just sort of to waste time and get myself ready for going back home, going back to school, whatever the next days were going to bring. And as I was swinging on those swings, I started to contrast these joyful childhood memories that I had playing in that park as a kid with how I was feeling now as a teenager, very broken, disillusioned, lost, confused, empty, and numb. And I just didn't know what to do anymore. It felt like no matter what I did, I couldn't go back. I couldn't move forward. It felt like I was just spinning in circles. No matter how much I hoped, no matter how much I tried, no matter how much I prayed, it didn't seem like anything I did was really helping. It just felt like one bad thing after another was happening, and it was pulling me down further and further and further into this depression. And I just didn't know that's what it was. So I was feeling very down on myself, about everything. I really did blame myself for a lot of things, which was another part of the problem. But as I was sitting on those swings, I looked around, because I knew in this growing up next to this park, basically, that you're not supposed to be in there after dark. The police will patrol the park. They drive in and out throughout the night to make sure nobody's there at night just for safety's sake, and I knew if they saw me on the swings, which was really close to the driveway they drive in and out on, they would, like, come talk to me and tell me I needed to go home and that type of stuff, and I could have gone home, I really could have, but I was there because I wanted some more time to just think and gather my emotions and my heart, and so I looked around to see where else I could go, and I looked, to my left, and at the edge of the park was a set of train tracks, and I saw a train that had been parked on them for, I figured, about 3 weeks because I'd driven by and it hadn't moved at all. It just was there, in one spot for 3 weeks. So I figured it probably wasn't going anywhere and I could probably go over there to sit and give myself a little bit more time to think. And I've had people ask me before, was that something that you did regularly? Did you sit on the trains growing up? And no, I never ever ventured that close to them, but I felt like I was like big enough, strong enough, smart enough or something. I just felt like it wouldn't be a problem. I could just go over there and sit on it. And as I sat on the train, I started to think more about everything that had been going on in my life. And it wasn't long after I started sitting there that I remembered a thought process that I'd had about 3 months beforehand. It was as I was grieving through my friend Brandon's death, actually sitting like right where I am right now on the floor in this room. I was grieving through my friend Brandon's death. He's the friend that I lost to suicide, and I just didn't know how to process his death. His death was really, really hard for me. I remember thinking I could never do that. I could never take my life. Why would he do that? Why would he do it the way that he did it? And I could never do that. And then as I was grieving through his death, thinking about that, I started to think, well, if I would never do it, how would I do it if I wouldn't do it the way that he did it? And it was a very unhealthy thought process, but I let myself go down this rabbit hole and I started to think about things that I'd heard about, read about, or seen on TV, and none of them seemed like they would necessarily work or be good enough. But then sitting in this room in my parents' home, I could hear a train go by our home, and as I could hear it from this room because we were like a half a block from the tracks growing up, and so I could hear the whistle blare through the windows. I could feel the train sort like the our home sort of shake, just slightly. It's something I was very used to, but it just sort of snapped in my mind as that happened. That's one way I could never live through it, and it was so completely hypothetical. I didn't really think I was considering suicide. I just went down that rabbit hole thinking, "How would I do it if I would never do it the way that he did it, even though I would never do it?" And so I thought through the whole scenario I just told you, and I never thought about it again until 3 months later when I was sitting on the train that day. And as I was sitting on the train, just trying to wrap my head around everything that had gone wrong, getting ready to go back to school the next day, go back home, um, that night, I started to go back and forth in my mind. I actually and that was when I actually started to consider suicide as an option or as an answer. I really had not considered it before, even though I had become really hopeless and reckless and depressed. I did not know I was suicidal, and I didn't seriously consider it until that day. And so that day, I remember my thought processes were so back and forth, and I would think I was really trying to talk myself out of it both ways. I would think there's a reason I'm here, there's something I'm supposed to do here, and then I would think there's nothing I'm supposed to do here. There's no reason for me to be here. And then I would think it's going to get better, and then I don't think it's not going to get any better. And I was back and forth like that along those same types of thought processes for about an hour, hour and a half until a train started to come. And it was cold out. I actually had my gloves on, like a big down winter jacket on, and I was still getting cold. So I knew as this train started to come, if I if I was going to do anything, it had to be now. I knew that I couldn't stay out there much longer. And so I either needed to go home or I needed to make a decision. And I made the very impulsive decision to lay down on the tracks in a moment of complete hopelessness. I just did not think there was anything left for me to live for. I thought I had kind of experienced it all and it was never going to get any better. And so as I got off the train that I was sitting on to approach the tracks that the approaching train was coming on, I I remember just trying to push down the fear and the shame that I felt in the inside because I knew this wasn't the answer. I knew this wasn't what I was supposed to be doing, but I just did not know what the right answer was. I didn't know what my next step was or what I should do from there going forward. And so I pushed down the fear, I pushed down the shame, and I just kind of stopped feeling. I closed my eyes, I clenched my fists, I laid down on the tracks, and I turned my head in the opposite direction than where the train was coming from because I didn't want to see it come at me. And what I remember when the train first started to go over me was I remember feeling it, um, just hearing it first just go really fast above me and feeling it start to bring my hair, my shoulders and the midsection of my body, my head, all of it upward. I was like my body was raising, and all of a sudden very quickly after that I felt something push me down into the ground, and I had no idea what that was. I just felt all of this happening, and I heard it all happening at once, but I felt something hold me down into the ground very firmly. And then all of a sudden the train like squealed to a stop, and I had no idea what to think. I had no idea if I was alive or if I was dead, if this was just a bad dream. I was really confused because it all happened so fast. And as I opened my eyes and unclenched my fists, I started to look around, you know, with some trepidation to figure out what had just happened. And as I looked around me, about 10 feet behind me on my right, I saw my legs, and I knew that they were my legs because they had these bright white tennis shoes on them that I just gotten for Christmas, and I just felt like this could not be my reality. This couldn't be my real life. This had to be a terrible dream, and so I sort of gathered myself, emotionally as best as I could. I used my arms to crawl out from underneath the train, and as I got to the side of the tracks, I started to look down at what had just happened. I just wanted to see if they were really gone, if I was just imagining that, and as I looked down at my left leg, I could tell that it had been severed, very well above the knee, but could hardly see it. I couldn't see it very clearly because it was so dark out. So I turned my attention to the right leg, which had been severed directly below the knee. But I'd never seen my leg like that before. I had never even seen an amputated leg before. So I took my hand and I ran it below where it looked like it had been severed. And I figured, if I could do that, I would know my leg was really gone. And I unintentionally brought my hand up to my face. And even with gloves on, I could see all of the blood. And that is when the pain hit me because I had felt pain before this, but not like I did once I realized my legs were gone and I was still alive. It hit me in a whole nother way. I started crying the way a small child would for my mom, and my mom, that part of the story is so hard for her because she was actually out looking for me, and she always wonders if she just couldn't hear me. And it breaks my heart now that I'm a mom, but I started crying for her like a small child would. And I was definitely in the worst pain I had ever been in my life. And in that moment, crying harder than I'd ever cried in my life for my mom, in the worst pain I'd ever been in my life, this tremendous peace just started to cover me. And I started to hear the song Amazing Grace play over and over in my mind, and I just thought that could only be music from heaven. That must be music from heaven. I thought I was just, like, in the process of dying, and I just needed to, like, wait to lose enough blood, and eventually I would be there. I didn't really know, like, what it took to go to heaven or anything like that. I just hoped I could go there and that it would be a better place than this earth. And so I laid there just resting in that peace, hearing the song Amazing Grace play over and over in my mind, just hoping, praying, and waiting to die until all of a sudden I felt somebody pull my hair off my face and behind my ear. And I was not expecting anybody to find me. And of course, and unfortunately, I didn't want anybody to find me, but I read in the police report, actually, it says in the police report that, the conductor of the train said to the engineer, "Did you see that yellow flash?" And the engineer said to the conductor, "Yes, I think we just hit someone." The yellow flash that they had seen was my bright yellow jacket as I had laid down on the tracks. And so they had called 911, and there were a number of paramedics and like ambulance and fire workers that were working the firefighters that were walking the tracks trying to find me. And it was a firefighter who found me first. And he's the one who pulled my hair off my face and behind my ear. And I remember as soon as I felt that, just sort of like looking back to see who or what that was. And as I looked up behind me, I saw this firefighter just sort of like stumble back because he wasn't even expecting me to be alive. And he radioed to the other medical personnel of my location and my status, and they did something that they have never done since, that wasn't protocol, that they, had never done beforehand, um, uh, to my knowledge from everything that I've heard, and that was that they blocked all of the roads and the intersections from where I was to the closest hospital in the area that could take me. They had originally wanted to flight for life me to a hospital in Milwaukee, which was about an hour away, but they realized they were gonna have to take me by ambulance to this hospital that was 45 minutes away. So what they did was they blocked all of the roads and the intersections from where I was to that hospital. And it says in the police report that it's normally a 45-minute drive, but that they got me there in 8 minutes. And I remember as I got to the hospital, just being kind of in shock by everything. I was awake the whole time. I was conscious the whole time. And I remember them asking me as I got there what my name was, what my parents' names were, what my sister's name was, what her phone number was, what my parents' phone number was. They just wanted to get as much information from me as they could, as quickly as they can. And I was able to answer all of their questions. And not long after that, as they were like getting me ready to go into surgery, just like 2 minutes later, probably, I heard some of them talking in the corner about how they felt like they were witnessing some sort of a miracle, and I was like, "Are they talking about me? Like, that's crazy. I'm not a miracle. I don't wanna be a miracle. I don't feel like a miracle." Like, I just was like, "No." And the reason I found out later that the reason they had been saying that is because I'd already lost 8 pints of blood, and scientifically, you're supposed to die after you lose about 5, but I was still very much alive, conscious, talking, awake, aware of what was going on. And so, even though I didn't wanna be a miracle, even though I didn't feel like I deserved to be alive or wanted to be alive, they wheeled me down to the operating room, and I remember looking up at the doctor in his, like, white coat walking me, in this stretcher or whatever to the operating room if he thought I was going to live or die. I was really looking for some sort of assurance one way or another I wouldn't have to go through, like, any more pain in my life is really, I think, what I was looking for. And he told me he didn't know, and he says that he told me that because he wanted me to go into surgery that night fighting to die, fighting to live. He just knew I would be better off going into surgery that night fighting. And when um I went into surgery, I was in surgery for several hours because they did all the blood transfusions they needed to replace the blood that I had lost and keep me alive, and they also tried to reattach my legs, which is something they weren't successful at doing, but they tried for a long time to do. So it wasn't until the next day, that I woke up in intensive care, and you know, it took me a bit to even realize what had all happened, but at the moment I first opened my eyes, I remember I saw my mom, my dad, my brother-in-law, and my sister all in the room right across from my bed with their arms crossed and their heads looking down at the floor. They were just all standing there, and I remember thinking like, "Oh my gosh, what just happened?" Not even realizing it was me, and my mom's eyes met with mine, and she just ran to the side of my bed, and she said, "Oh, honey, we're so glad you're okay," and the memories started to flood back, and I just said, "Mom, they cut my clothes and they cut my coat," and, it just was sort of a huge overwhelming moment, and she's like, "Oh, honey, it's okay. You're gonna be fine. You don't need your clothes, we'll get you new ones. We're just glad you're okay. We're glad you're okay. You're here with us. Don't worry about that." And so I sort of listened to that and fell back asleep, and I was on a lot of medication, so I can't tell you, like, how many days or hours later it was, but the next thing I remember was waking up and feeling really sort of, like, gross and icky. I had a doctor come in a little before this to tell me what my injuries were, and I just, was sort of half awake and half ready to not even half ready to deal with what he said, but he told me as I stared out the window, that my left leg was severed well above the knee, that my right leg was severed directly below the knee, but that I might be able to walk with the use of prosthetic legs one day. And I know that he was just trying to give me a little bit of hope and encouragement after everything that I had been through. I know that he was just trying to, help me, but I wasn't ready to deal with it yet. It was so soon and so unplanned. I just never expected any of this. And so I stared out the window and I just couldn't even answer him. I didn't say hi, I didn't say bye, I didn't say thank you. I just stared out the window as he told me that. But the next time I woke up, as I had started to tell you, I woke up feeling just sort of gross and icky. I'm sure that I had like blood, sweat, and tears on me after everything that I had been through. And I asked my mom, who was in the room, if she could call my friend Kelly to help me get cleaned up. I asked if she could like come and do my hair and makeup. And my mom was like, I'll get Kelly on the phone just a second. She called her. And as soon as Kelly got on the phone, she asked me how I was doing. And um, I hadn't had anybody ask me yet at that point. It was still very early. But she had heard about what happened and she asked me how I was doing. And I felt like I had to tell her something. I didn't know that she already knew, but I felt like she was my best friend. So she deserved to know one way or another. And so I looked down at my legs to see if they were really gone. And as I looked down at them, even with a sheet covering them, I could tell that they were mostly gone. And so I just said to her, "I'm okay, but my legs are cut off." And as I said that, tears just started to stream down my face because that's the moment that it became real to me. That's when I realized my legs were really gone and this was my real life. This wasn't just a terrible dream, a terrible nightmare, something I had made up or and like written a story about or whatever. This was real life. And she said to me something that people sometimes people think this is so simple, so trite, but what she said was, "Honey, you're gonna be fine. You don't need your legs. You're gonna be just fine." And I don't know, but that was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. It wasn't simple, it wasn't trite, it was exactly what I needed to hear. I needed to know that my best friend thought I was gonna be fine with or without my legs. She thought I was gonna be just fine, and that kinda gave me strength for the next couple days. And so it was really just a one day at a time process, but eventually I went from intensive care to moderate care, and, I think I was in that hospital for about 3 months, but I was able to go home at one point, just for the weekend. I went back to my parents' house for the first time in a wheelchair, and it was a really hard weekend because I didn't, prepare for how hard it was gonna be getting myself around in a wheelchair, especially at their house because it was like 25 stairs up to my room at our house, and they had really thick plush carpet, and it was just I just wasn't prepared, and so my arms were shaking, my arms were burning, my tears were falling. It was very, very difficult, but on that weekend that I was out of the hospital, we did go back to church, and while I was there, a woman I didn't know who had heard about what happened to me just came up to me and told me something I don't recommend you say to anyone, but she just said to me that she thought I would have went to hell if I died. And it was shocking. It was heartbreaking. It was scary. I didn't know how to process it. But the one good thing about it is that it sent me searching. And in the hospital, in those like 3 months, I had a lot of people who said things to me like, who told me it was a miracle that I survived, and all the reasons why. It was a miracle that I just lost my legs. It was a miracle that I survived after losing, 8 pints of blood. But but knowing that I was so fortunate to still be alive. I really wondered what would have happened to me if I had died. And everyone else told me what I call sort of the feel good answer. They would say things like, "Oh, Kristen, you would have went to heaven. Don't worry about it. You would be fine." And this lady told me something possibly different. And it made me wonder. I just really wanted to know one way or another if I had died, where I would have been right then, right then and there. And so I just, started to pray about it, and it was really quickly. A couple came to have dinner with our family. They were like neighbors and friends of my sister's and her husband, and they had heard about what happened, and they just wanted to like come alongside us, bring a meal. Or maybe my mom made the meal. I don't remember, but they came to have dinner with us. And I learned through having dinner together that the husband of this couple was in seminary to be a pastor, and I just kind of took that as my opportunity after dinner to ask him if he thought I would have went to heaven or hell if I died. I really didn't know anyone else who knew the Bible like he did, so I figured he would know better than anyone else, and I asked him just very candidly and very lovingly and patiently. He responded, and he just told me that every single one of us are created to be in this like personal, close relationship with God. But because of our sin and because of the wrong things that we've done, we are separated from Him, both relationally and eternally. And he told me that is why Jesus died, to pay the penalty for our sins so that we can be put back into a right relationship with him, so we can have that close relationship with him again, and so that we can spend eternity in heaven with him. And when he told me that, I knew that what he was telling me was something more true than I had ever heard in my life before, but I just didn't want to take his word for it. So I asked him to show me it in the Bible. And he showed me a lot of different verses, but the verse that stood out to me the most was John 14:6. And that is where Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. And I knew that night as I like sat on the floor in my parents' dining room thinking about what he had said and how true it was, that I had never made a decision like personally to accept Jesus for the forgiveness of my sins and to let him lead my life, let him into my heart and get to know him. I knew that something like very special and important seemed to be missing from my life. And I suspected, I was really just not sure yet, but I suspected maybe this was a real having like a real relationship with God. And I decided to pray and ask Jesus that night. For the forgiveness of my sins. I just prayed the most simple little prayer. I asked, I really felt like a lot of shame and guilt over trying to take my own life. And so I said something like, God, I can't believe what I have done. I can't believe what I've done to myself and to my life and to my family. I asked him to forgive me for everything I had ever done wrong. I asked him to give me a new life. And I can't tell you that it was like exactly the words that I prayed or anything, but it was the position my heart was in that started to change things. And as I let him into my life and I started to turn my life over to him, things started to change. I know as I went to sleep that night in this bed, which is just crazy to be sharing my story here in my old bedroom, but as I went to sleep in this bed right here, I just felt a little bit different. I really felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I just didn't need to worry about my life that much anymore. I felt like one way or another, somehow I was going to be okay. And so I started to move forward in my life. And sometimes I wish I could tell people, I know that was, first of all, I know that was the night that I became a Christian. I would have told you my whole life that I was a Christian, but I didn't really know him. I had never really made that choice and let him in to my heart and into my life. And so that was the night that I became a Christian, and I wish sometimes I could tell people that's when it all changed, like, overnight, I was a whole new person, and I had, everything changed for me, but it was a process, and that's how it is for most people that I meet. It's not like a overnight transformation. We go through these hills and these valleys, and that's really what it was for me. For the next 3 years, I still struggled with suicidal thoughts and depression, honestly. I was in and out of the psych ward, I was in and out of jobs, I was in and out of relationships, I was in and out of college. I was still, floundering quite a bit. I was not searching like I was, but I wasn't grounded like I needed to be. And, in that period of time, I, met a lady, um well, actually, one thing I want to share first. I had a counselor that I was seeing the whole time who I know God put in my life. And two of the things she helped me realize was um, that I had accepted God's forgiveness, but I had not forgiven myself. And I was in many ways still punishing myself. Um, for what I had done to change in my life and make it so much harder, and how that affected my family and the other people around me. And so I needed to forgive myself. And she had me memorize a verse, the very first verse I ever memorized, which was Romans 8:1. And there, that is where it says, "Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." And I would just, I kind of just made it my mission to take on that challenge to memorize this verse. And the more that I did that, the more it started to sink into my heart, into my mind. I just really started to understand what that meant. And I realized that I was no bigger, no greater, no more important or special or anything than God was. And if He could forgive me for everything that I had done wrong, even trying to take my own life, there was really no reason for me not to forgive myself. And so I started to work on what that looked like and how to do that. And as I started to forgive myself, things started moving forward at a much quicker pace. And in that same time period, I met this lady at the community college I had been going to, who came up to me in the parking lot one night. She was a beautiful woman, and she just felt called to share her story with me in the parking lot. So she shared very openly, her life story with me at right before, like, we got to our cars. And she, talking to her that night, I think we probably talked in the parking lot for, like, 30 minutes, and she shined with more peace and more joy and more love for life than anybody I'd ever met before. And so after I met her, I went home and I just said to God as I was getting ready for bed, "I wanna know you the way that lady knows you," because I had, at that point, learned to go to my doctors and my counselors and my friends and my family and whoever else was around me, really, for help with my problems. I wasn't keeping everything inside anymore, but I really had not learned how to go to God for help with my problems. And so what I felt Him tell me was, "Kristen, you have to let me be your best friend." When I told Him, "I want to know you the way that lady knows you," that's what I felt inside. I had to let Him be my best friend. And so I started talking to Him like He was my best friend. I realized that He knew my problems more than anyone else in this world, and the answers to them, most likely better than anyone else in this world. And there's really nobody better for me to talk to about everything anyway. So I started talking to Him all the time and walking towards Him in a best friend type of relationship. And it was almost like I was walking straight out of my depression. I was able to get off of all of my antidepressants and pain meds that I'd been on at the time, which my doctors told me I would have to take for the rest of my life. And that was really, really powerful. I had started going to a new church in our area where there were people my age who were going to church and learning, like, reading their Bibles and living for God and serving Him. And I just started to take off spiritually. I was starting to experience, the more I walked towards Him and did life with Him His way, I experienced more peace and more joy and more strength and more comfort and more, like, wholeness, than I had ever had in my life before, but always really wanted. I always wanted to feel that way. And my not only was my life changing, but my family's lives were changing. My mom, started coming to church with me, and then my dad started coming to church with her, and my brother started coming to church with him, and our whole family came to Christ at this time. And we did, not fully understand what had how God, was working at the time. But we would have always told you that we were Christians. We would have told you we believed in God, and we believed in Jesus, but we did not have a relationship with Him. He was not the center of our lives. We had not personally accepted Him into our hearts and into our lives. And we never, besides like bedtime and meals, we didn't really talk about God. We didn't really pray together. We didn't read any of the same books or listen to any of the same music. And all of those things changed after we all came to know the Lord in this real and personal way. We started praying together about things we never would have before. We started talking about things we never would have before. We started, to just we just took off spiritually. And I, shortly after all of that, got asked to share my story, what happened in my life and in my family with the high school youth group that was at our church. And that was difficult for me because I actually had shared my story for the first time at my baptism earlier that year, but I thought it would be like the one and only time I ever shared it, like just with a few people there, like 30 people. Um, but the high school youth pastor was there, and he's the one who decided to ask me if I would share it with the high schoolers. And I was about 21 at this time, and I remembered what it was like to be in high school. I remembered how hard everything was, and I just knew I did not want any one of them to end up where I was. I didn't want them to try and take their lives or do anything close to that before they realized how big and how real and how good and how powerful God was. So I just very openly shared my story with the high schoolers at our church that night. And not long later, just at the end of that night, almost all of them came up to me and told me that they told me either that they struggle with suicidal thoughts or depression, or they knew somebody who did. And that was really eye opening for me, because when you're struggling with depression or suicidal thoughts, or many other things very similar, you feel like you're the only one. You feel like nobody understands, nobody knows what I'm going through, nobody gets it. And so when all these kids came up to me and told me they were struggling in the same way, or they knew somebody who did, I was floored. I couldn't believe how common it seemed all of a sudden. And I something just started to stir in me because I wanted to help all of them as much as I could. And right after I shared my story with the high school youth group there, I got asked to share my story at a high school youth group about an hour north of where I lived. And I thought it would I really thought like the last time it would just be like one more time. I would see what God could do, if he wanted, to help anybody through this. Maybe he would help one more person. I didn't really know what to expect, but I just felt like I should share the story at least one more time. And so I shared again as openly and vulnerably as I could. And even as I was sharing, it was like so clear to me that things were changing in their hearts and in their lives. I could see their eyes were opening, their hearts were opening. It was almost like the chains were falling off of them. And afterwards, I had the most incredible conversations with them about how they were planning to take their life, but now they were going to give their lives to the Lord, and they were going to seek him with their whole heart and learn to live for him. And just the fact that they were choosing life over death because they had heard my story was incredible to me. All of it was incredible to me. How God was using my little story, my little life, my mistakes, my sin, and how he had transformed my life to help somebody else. It was incredible. I was grateful that he had done what he did in my life, but it wasn't until that night that I realized part of the reason that he did what he did in my heart and in my life was so that other people could come to know him and find the peace and the hope and the strength that I did. And so that night after all of that happened, I remember I really just started to get on my knees and ask God why he kept me here, what I was supposed to do here. And I knew like the biggest reason was so that I could come to know him and have this relationship with him and spend eternity in heaven with him when I do die. But I realized the second biggest reason was so that I could help other people come to know him in this real and personal way. And I started praying about what that looked like and how he wanted me to do that. And I ended up starting a nonprofit called Reaching You Ministries for people who struggle with suicidal thoughts and depression, and a website and all of it back then. And then at around the same time, I started going to Moody Bible Institute, which was it's one of the biggest Bible colleges in the world, but it was only about an hour away from my parents' house. And if you knew me back in high school, you'd be shocked that I went to, Moody. But I'm realizing the time on this is 59:18. I might need to restart. So if this cuts out, I will come back on. I only have a little bit more here. But I wanted to tell you, that I went to Moody, and it was one of the most amazing times in my life. And while I was there, I got asked to share my story on the Oprah show. Oprah was planning a story for suicide survivors who were using their second chance at life to make a difference in the world. And it all happened really fast. I shared my story one Wednesday, it aired the next Wednesday, and I started to get thousands and thousands of emails through the ministry website of people whose lives were changed just because I shared my story. And okay, if you guys can still hear me, now this is at an hour. Can you still hear me okay? Please tell me if you can still hear me. Because I thought I read something that this would cut out after an hour. I'm surprised that went so fast. Let me see if anybody's on here that can hear me. So, I know it is still it says I'm still live. You can hear me. Oh, yay. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So I got thousands of emails from people who were like all around the world. I had to use like Google Translate to translate their emails. But there was one email. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now I'm seeing all your messages. We can hear you. Thank you, thank you. Okay, good, good, good. So there was one email, I always have to share this. One email that just stood out to me in particular because it was a young man who had written in the subject line in capital letters. It almost looked like bold print to me. You saved my life. And as I read his email, he talked about how he was trying to take his life that day that I shared my story in the Oprah show. He was just waiting for his mom to leave for work that day. And after she left for work, he went into the living room with a gun in his hand to turn the TV off. And as he went to turn the TV off, I was on the TV talking about how I had tried to take my life, how I was forever grateful to have survived, and how God had seriously transformed my heart and my life. And I had so much more hope and joy and peace in my heart and for the future. And he says that he got on his knees and he prayed to accept Jesus into his heart and into his life that day. And now he is a youth pastor leading other young people to the Lord. And I just couldn't believe, even before I knew that, hearing his story, reading his story about how God was in the details, not only in my life after losing 8 pints of blood or being run over by 33 freight train cars at 55 miles per hour, but he was in the details of this young man's life in the big ways and in the small ways. And it was humbling. It was so, so humbling to see how much bigger and more involved God was in all of our lives than maybe I had understood yet at that point. And not long after that, when my story was on the Oprah show, I was also getting emails from other authors who wanted to write my story with me or for me. Um, and I at first was like, I don't know that I'm ever going to do that. But I really became clear to me very quickly that I was getting so many requests to speak all over the world that I would never be able to answer them all. And so I knew if I wrote the book could go places I might never be able to go. And I decided to work with a woman who was a Christian author who had an amazing story of her own, who wanted to do it like with me, not just for me. And so we worked on it together for it was probably about 2 years from beginning till end when it was like published. It was a really hard and difficult process. But it was so much more worth it than I could even describe. The book, the title that it was given is Life in Spite of Me. And oh, I can't take credit for that. I really can't. It was the publisher's idea, but I love it. I feel like nothing could have been more fitting because that is exactly what God has done. He has given me life physically, spiritually, emotionally, all in spite of my sin and my mistakes and the wrong choices I've made, all the ways that I've stumbled and everything. He was so unbelievably faithful. He's given me so much life back that I didn't even deserve. And the book is now in 8 languages. This is the book, Life in Spite of Me. So it was first in hardcover and then it was published in paperback and now it's in 8 languages. So I still get emails from people all over the world who um, have read it in their language, and then I use Google Translate to read them and answer. Um, but it's just unbelievable to me that God can use an ordinary person to do extraordinary things. I think He delights in that. No matter who you are or where you are or what you've done, I know that He has a plan for you. I used to believe um, that God only had a plan for special people. That was like, that seemed to make sense to me for a long time. But during the deepest, darkest days of my depression, during that like 3 years that I was still really struggling, there was a verse I held on to. It was on a magnet, actually. That's why I'm holding my fingers like this. It was on a magnet that I got in a card when I was in the hospital. And it said, For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, but to give you a hope and a future. And during those deepest, darkest days of my depression, I just held on to that verse. And I believed that even when I didn't have hope for myself, God had hope for me. Even when I didn't have plans for myself, God had plans for me. Even when I didn't have a future for myself, God had a future for me. And He really, really did. I haven't even told you all of it yet. That is just like the beginning. Since then, I have gotten married to a very sweet, sweet, amazing Christian man. And he has brought two children into my life. And we have had, get this, 4 more together. And the 4 little ones that we named together, we named all in honor of God's grace. The best way God's grace has ever been described to me is that is when God gives us favor and we don't even deserve it. And I know that is like so much incredibly exactly what God did for me. He gave me favor when I didn't even deserve it. He gave me a second chance when I didn't even deserve it. He gave me hope when I didn't even deserve it. He gave me forgiveness when I didn't even deserve it. He gave me life. He gave me so much life back, and I didn't deserve it. And so they are all named in honor of God's grace. And I am incredibly grateful to still be here and to be sharing with you today. And I just want to emphasize that suicide is never, ever, ever the answer, no matter what you are going through, no matter how bad it feels. Don't follow your feelings. Reach out for help. Don't wait. Reach out for help today. Ask for help and keep asking for help until you get it, because not everybody understands and not everybody knows how to help, but somebody knows, and more than just one person knows. So keep asking for help and realize that you are not your problems. We are not our problems. If I could go back, I was thinking about this as I got ready. If I could go back and talk to myself, 17-year-old me who lived here in this room, what would I say to myself? And I would just say, "Oh, honey, you are not your problems. You are not your problems and the things that have happened to you and the things that you've done wrong. You are so much more than your problems, and God has a future for you. God has plans for you. There's good things in store for you. You just need to hang on. Take one step at a time. Take 1 minute at a time. Take one day at a time. Do not feel like you have to figure it all out right now. You're going to get through this. You are strong enough. You are here for a reason. Lean on God's strength, not just on your own, and trust Him, because His plans for you are bigger than any plans you've ever had for yourself. And they really were. His plans for me are bigger than anything I could have ever dreamed for myself. And I think they are for every single one of us. If you have air in your lungs, I believe that you're here for a reason. God has you here for a reason. You might not know what it is yet, but you just need to seek Him. You just need to serve Him, make yourself available to Him. He wants to use you. He wants to use your story. He wants to use your heart. He wants to use your life, your failures, your lessons, your triumphs, your victories. He wants to use all of it. And He wants to help you feel the peace and the joy and the love for life that He has always wanted for you as well. So I am going to not close this yet, but open it up for questions. If you guys have any questions now that you want to share, I would love to hear any questions I might be able to answer. And I also want to invite you to share any prayer requests so that we can be praying for you after this um, live ends. All right. I know there was a question kind of up there somewhere. Let's see if there is any more. I see that prayer right there. Okay. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing that prayer. Thank you so much. Ray, thank you so much. I'm so glad it has helped you even again tonight. You are definitely here for a reason. I promise you. You are here for a reason. God has a plan for each and every one of us. He doesn't just have a plan for special people. He really loves you and he created you for a reason. Okay, let me see if there are um questions. Shailene asked, "Do you still suffer from depression?" So that's a really, really good question. I think about this all the time. When I am struggling, what I call it depression or not. And I think there have been times, especially after having children, with all the hormonal fluctuations. I think I was closer to um, feeling bit of a depression than I maybe even realized. Um, but I also know that I'm like very susceptible to that and that it's a very slippery slope. So I'm very, very mindful of all the things that I need to do to help myself stay grounded and focused and hopeful and not to fall deeper and deeper into that pit as much as I can help it. And God is the biggest help in when it comes to that. There are so many other tools that I have in my tool belt, but he is the number one thing that has helped me the most. So I hope that helps. I think that sometimes people think Christians should be immune from depression. I don't believe that. I think that we live in a fallen world, and just like diabetes or cancer can affect anyone, it's the same with depression. I totally believe it is not unusual for even someone who is a believer to struggle with depression. So don't feel any guilt for that, please. Keep fighting, keep reaching out for help, keep leaning on the Lord, keep putting your trust in Him, keep getting a support system around you. Even for me, a big part of my healing process was becoming a part of the church that I joined at the time and finding that community and having that support as well. So what else is in your toolbox? Okay, so Shailene, I thought you might ask that. I'm going to be talking about that more um, soon. I'm going to be doing this course called the Depression Battle Plan. So I'm putting it all together right now. Um, but great question, and I will be sharing more about that very soon. What practical things do you do to stay emotionally healthy? Blah, blah, blah. Sorry for reading that weird. Practical things. A lot of it is staying on a schedule, like making sure I get out of bed, whether I feel like it or not, making sure I'm eating healthy. I did not really realize until after I got married and started having kids how important my physical health was, how like deficient I was in some vitamins and things like that. All of that has been very helpful, taking good care of myself physically, making sure I stay on a good schedule, making sure I get the sleep that I need. And those are very, very simple things. But also making sure that I focus on God's word regularly, like even with how busy my life is, I make sure that I am finding time to be, with Him every day. And that I have people I can talk to about how I'm feeling and what's going on in my life, whether it's a counselor, whether it's a friend, whether it's a pastor. I make sure that I have people that know what's going on and I'm processing through that and I'm not just doing it alone in my head because that is, kind of where we can sometimes sort of spin out of control. I also recommend um, exercise. Now, I'm not really good at this, but this is one of the things that can help you a lot. Vitamin D is another one, even just, sunlight. I try to get a lot of sunlight, but I'm not really good at exercising. Being in a wheelchair and not having my legs makes that a little tricky. But I know that can help a lot. I know that all of those things make a big difference. When we take care of ourselves the way that God wants us to, everything starts to come together. When you see yourself the way that God wants you to, like finding your value and your hope and your purpose in Him, like seeing myself through His eyes and seeing the world through His eyes was really transformational as well. Okay. So I think that is probably all we're going to do for questions tonight. I did want to give away um, two books here. So if we could, I think I'm just going to like pick a number, and if you want to just put I'll pick a number in my head, and if you put it in the chat, you can have a book, and I'm actually going to send a shirt with it too. During COVID, I started designing all these inspirational shirts. And so I'll find out what your shirt size is, and you'll get a shirt that says "You Matter" as well. Okay, so each of us have a book written about us in heaven of amazing destiny and purpose. This is in Psalm 139 and Malachi 3. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so Rick, 4 was one of my numbers. Good job, good job. And Donna, 17, no, 16, 8, Yari. Okay, so Rick and Yari, you'll be getting these books. And if anybody else wants a copy of the book, you can get it through the website or on Amazon. The book is, you can get it both places. If you order it through us, obviously it helps support us reaching more people to help save more lives, and gets me into more schools and places like that that don't have all the resources to bring me in. Also, I want to pray before I go, and just let you know that everything else, like the speaker request forms and all of that, are on the website reachingyou.org, where you can get the book. If you want to donate, also that's another option. If you go to reachingyou.org/donate, any donation over $20, you get a free copy of the book. And you can give once, you can give monthly, however you want to do that to help support us and help us save more lives. Okay, thank you guys very, very, very much for being here. I am just blessed to have you and to have answered a few of your questions. And I look forward to answering more and bringing more people on here with me who can help bring more hope and encouragement to you as well. And I do want to share a verse before I pray. There was a verse that I thought about so many times today. It is Isaiah 40:31. This is what it says. Listen to this. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. Isaiah 40:31. That has been on my heart all day, and I just had to share that with you guys before we went today. Who the two winners? It was Yari and Rick. Can you please send me your address, whatever platform you're watching on? I think it's Facebook. Just send us your address so that we can send you a copy of the books. And if you want it written to you, or if it's going to be for somebody else, let me know so I know how to sign it. Okay. Thank you guys again. And I'm going to pray before we close. I'm just blessed to have you here, but I want to pray for anybody who's struggling. And remember to reach out for help. You can text or call if you're in a really bad place right now and you need to talk to somebody right now. Please text or call 988. It is just really, really important that you start talking to somebody now and that you don't put it off. That's one of the things one of the mistakes I made for a long time. So I want to say that and pray for you and anyone else here who is struggling. Lord, I thank you so much for this night. I thank you so much for the people that you brought here to listen to this story that you wrote, Lord. I thank you for the hope that you've given me and the life that you've given me, Lord. And I thank you that you have good plans for each and every one of us, Lord. I thank you that your purpose and plans are bigger and greater than anything we could ever plan for ourselves, Lord. And I thank you that you give us your peace and your strength and your joy as we go throughout our lives, Lord. It doesn't always look like we think it should, but you are always there. You are always at work. You are working all things together for our good and using what the enemy meant, even what the enemy meant for evil, for good, Lord. And I give you thanks and I give you glory and I give you praise for that. And I ask you to just draw near and to draw close to anybody who is hurting right now, who's feeling hopeless or empty or alone, Lord. I pray that you would give them your comfort, and I pray that you would lift them up. I pray that you would pull them out of that pit as they call on you. And I pray that they would feel a greater amount of strength and a greater amount of peace and joy as they walk towards you, Lord. I know that you want that for them as well, and that you don't want any of your children, any of us who you have created, to suffer, Lord. We can learn so much through those times, but you don't want us to be there forever, Lord. And I just ask for your grace and your mercy on everyone else who's here with us tonight, Lord. And we pray all of these prayers in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, guys. I hope you have a great, great night. Bye-bye.